Welcome back to Power Conversations and Connections with Susan, where we talk life, the beauty, and the vulnerability on the journey to self love and evolving into our best selves. I hope you've had a wonderful day. And I want to talk today about identity revealed, the journey through new wine season. I tell you what new wine season is for me and likely for you. I don't know if you've called it that, but it is when you're entering into a new season and you don't know which way it's going to go. It's new to you, it's fresh, it's fearful, and you're taking steps, but you don't know if you're going anywhere. New wine season is when I think about the Bible where it says, for everything, there is a season, right? And we hear that, but it's really hard to embrace that when that season comes and you're not ready. For me, when I began to go into new wine season, I was told by the Holy Spirit after 35 years of being in leadership and communication that I was going to shift, that my life purpose, my journey, everything was going to change. And I was like, no, I'm good. I'm going to stay right here. And of course, you never really win that argument. But the first thing I felt was fear. Like, how am I going to manage in another space? I'm so used to leadership and communication. I've become a subject matter expert in my field. I've become a subject matter expert in my career and outside of my career in my company, Appleton Communication, at that time. And so I didn't want to step into new territory. Have you ever felt like that? Like you're being pulled somewhere that you're not ready to go? And initially, the first thing is flight or fear, right? And or both. For me, it was fleeing from the prospect of doing something different and fearing going into a new territory that I didn't know anything about. One of the things that I've had is friends who know exactly what I need when I need it, right? And I have one particular friend who has always addressed me, has always talked, our relationship has always come from a spiritual perspective. And I knew that I was wrestling with letting go of everything that I had done for 35 years, all the successes that I had. And I wasn't sure, but I knew that this new thing, even though I was fearing it, it was the thing that was waking me up in the middle of the night to grab my journal and to jot down things that were coming to my head. It was the thing that was driving me, waking me up in the morning versus what I had always done. And when I began to explain that to my friend, she said, after listening, you're dealing with identity versus assignment. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Have you ever placed your identity, who you are, what you do in the world, how you impact the world in your career, your title, whether it's a mom or whether it's a leader, you wrap your identity around that thing. And I had wrapped my identity around Appleton Communication and leadership, coaching, strategy development. That was who I thought that I was. And if I let that go, then what? I have to start over. And yes, I know about transferable skills. That's the world I come from. But I'm talking about walking into a separate lane, a separate purpose with being completely new, having no prior skills. And God was telling me that I was getting ready to shift, that my brand, Susan R. Appleton, was going to become a thing and that it was going to be a big thing. He began to download vision. And the first part of the vision, of course, was the podcast. And I wanted to do that, but I was fearful of doing it. And when she said, you've wrapped yourself, Susan, in your identity, And you don't see that because it's been long. You didn't see it as an assignment. She said, but it was an assignment. And at any given moment, God can shift what an assignment is. And when I reconcile that, I began to think, okay, what's next? How do I come out of where I am and get into where I'm going? I know that we all face challenges. A new mother, you have the joy of being pregnant, but then when the baby comes, all of the pieces that go with it, no one has a manual that clearly tells us for us and our children and in our household how that new being is going to affect everything, my emotions, my schedule. If there are other children in the household, the husband, whatever, everything changes and it's new. It can be fearful and it's uncertain. And that's what I was feeling. Me, almost always confident, having come from a place where I had to build my confidence over the years, I didn't have the confidence that I did. And so I wondered very much so, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be successful at it? And how am I going to understand that this was just simply an assignment? And so I began to think about why I was being led to do this. What was the why? And the why was it was time for me to take what I had done in my career, the impact, the mentorship, the leadership, the coaching, the guidance, what I had done in Appleton Communication around strategy and development, and focus solely on women and helping them to understand not how to maneuver that world, but how to heal. I began to get permission from God to tell my story, to share my story. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know the way to do that. And so I just began to study and I began to posture myself to listen for direction. I've always journaled, I write a lot. And so I began to write and began to think, how is this going to happen? So that's the first thing that I encourage you to do when you're in a space and you're in this lane, you're on this assignment and you've wrapped your identity in it. And he says, change, do something different. And if I was being honest, I wanted to do something different. I just was fearful of doing it. And how was it going to work? I didn't know anyone in that world, or so I thought. I'm a speaker, so speaking and talking and having conversation comes fairly easy to me. But this was a different type of conversation. It was a conversation around how do you become the best you? And me sharing how I have become the best me. I'm still getting there, but it's that evolution, that process, that journey, and sharing that with other women so that they too could embrace where they are and where they're going to, even in times of uncertainty. One of the things that kept me grounded, of course, I've mentioned it, I'm not afraid or ashamed, is my relationship with God. I don't do a higher power. If you do, that's fine. But that is the higher power to me. When people say the universe is speaking, that would be God for me, right? So I had to really get in and cultivate what I already thought was a strong relationship. I had to ask and cry for help. And then I had to lean on people like my girlfriend for guidance and to have those talks with to help me when I was feeling uncertain. I also had to look for help in unknown places. One of the things that was told to me was I could not do what I was about to go into solely from my home. That was new wine season. And so I thought, okay, new wine season. Started studying. You put wine into a wineskin, and eventually the wine is ready to drink. So I went outside of my home, and the relationships that I had developed with some of the people that I was working with just so happened they were in that area. That just so happened, right? That's nothing but God putting people in my place and in my space that had a little bit more, actually a lot more experience in where I was going than what I did. I could do this part and they could do all the other pieces. And so I entered into new wine season, and you will enter into new wine season. And we've done it all throughout our lives, but we never called it that. When we went from this position to that position, or from this relationship to that relationship, or got into this challenge and got out of it, and we began to grow and develop, all of our journey has been new wine, things that we had never experienced before. And we don't often get to pick when that season changes and shifts. And that's the hard part, right? Is you may know you want to do a thing and you've planned it and it's going to be 2 or 3 years or 2 or 3 months, and then bam, something gets orchestrated and fast forwards that thing, right? And you're right in the midst of what you had planned to do later on, but you've got to do it now. A relationship breaks up, a friendship ends, a child or some type of tragedy happens, and you have to move right then into that new season. And we have to tap into the thing that keeps us grounded. We have to remember what got us over and through all of these other times that we've had that. That's what we have to do. We have to take the fear out of what we're doing and take the blame off of the circumstance and embrace where we're going. Sit in a thing. And if you haven't yet accepted it, accept it. Jump into it. Feet first, unknown, little bit at a time, so that you become experienced and you become more attuned with where you're going. So fast forward, right? When we begin to accept that this is a part of our journey, when we begin to stop fighting that this is where we are to go, we stop complaining, and then we can embrace the process. We can embrace the challenges. We can turn those negative gut feelings into this is something that is going to enrich the rest of my life. This thing, Power Conversations and Connections, my brand, it's going to enrich my life, but it's going to enrich the lives of so many others. And that is so much more important than me. And even more important than that for me and perhaps for you is you're following the vision. You're following the steps that are being orchestrated for you. And there can be no losing in that. There may be some downtime, but there can be no permanent loss in that. There's always winning when we start to embrace new wine season. And we start to ask ourselves, how is this going to do better for me in my life? And we lean in and we start to learn. And I had to become somewhat or begin to re-educate myself, right? I'm not a subject matter expert yet by any stretch of the imagination, but I am maturing. And so now he's begun to talk to me about new wine season maturing. Because you see, when I thought that I embraced it, I hear what you're saying, I'm doing it, I'm going out afraid, I'm stepping off of a cliff and I'm failing, I'm picking myself back up and I'm depending on you. So we're just going to keep going like this, and then bam, somewhat of a bottom drops out. and you have to shift again. So that season, we began to mature into it, and we began to do things that we hadn't done before in that particular place. We began to stop walking in fear and take risk because we're becoming bolder in what we are accomplishing. So that's the thing that I want to ask you to do. Start to look at your opportunity in the midst of going into a new space. Start to look at the beauty of going into a new space, just like you would if you were embracing something that you had planned and loved all your life. So when I got to the point where I knew that coaching is my core, I've always been that, right? I could merge my old season with my new wine season, and I could begin to mature and evolve and make that part of the best of the rest of my life. And so that's what I encourage you to do. What is on your heart? What vision has been given to you? What new place are you being challenged to step into that you're shying away from? Think about the possibilities. If I do this, then this will happen. And walk in that. Thank you for joining the conversation. Like, share, subscribe all over social media at Susan R. Appleton, at Power Conversations and Connections. I thank you, and I'll see you next time. Y'all be good.